Good afternoon. Good to see you guys, including you don't sleep guys, whoever. Glad you guys are here this afternoon. A few people here who weren't here last night. Really glad to see you guys, including some of the people who've been in my class the last couple years. Great to see some of those people here too. Here are lots of rustling in the papers, so I presume you all are way ahead of me and getting out the light sheet that's in that packet. That I am his light. Just a reminder that throughout this afternoon we have a couple of breaks. Just sort of stretch your legs, get up. You have 10, 15 minutes just to sort of mill around. There's a question box up here. And if something comes to mind you'd like to ask us a question about, feel free to write a note, there's a piece of paper up here and a pen. Drop it in that box, and I'll try to get to that, either today or sometime tomorrow during the worship when we're going to wrap this thing up. I'd like to know your questions. I want to know your questions. And you're going to have them. For that matter, remind me today, I'll try to give you a way to contact me, give you my email before this afternoon. I'll try to remember to do that. You may have questions afterwards, and if you want to reach out to me with a question, I want you to be able to do that. So I'll put that contact up there for you. I'm not going to give you my phone number, primarily because I teach at college, and I don't give my phone number out very readily at the college. Usually a couple times I'll get texts at, 12 a.m., 1 a.m. I'm going to text this kid at 6:30 a.m. just to show. You text me that late, I'll text you that early. No, not a big deal. But I want you to reach out to me. I want to reach out to me with questions. Great singing, by the way. I don't know how many of you that last song we sang was new. It's a wonderful song. I love that song. I was in the back, so I couldn't really tell. When we were little, if you grew up in the church, one of the first songs you sing as a little kid is This Little Christian Light of Mine. And you guys know that. You know that song. Yeah. Of course you know that song, right? This Little Christian Light of Mine. And so very early on, we teach children what it means to be a light. At least that you're supposed to be one. This little Christian light of mine, don't let the devil, all that stuff. And when we're young, we get some idea what that means. But as we get older, we need to develop a more mature understanding of what it means to be a light. And there's a lot of things that we learn as kids, particularly if you grew up in a church, or you're Christian, your parents are Christians, they're teaching you at home, they're reading you the Bible, telling you Bible stories at home. We grasp something at the level of a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or even an 11-year-old. And sometimes, if we're not careful, we can get stuck there. We can think, I get this. And we might get it, but we might get it this much, and there's this much to it. Right? And so we want to expand our view of what some of these things are that we've understood for a while. So this is not a new idea to you. We are the light, a light in the world. That's a very, very common idea to you. But at some point, we can add more to it. Don't we understand? We're little kids. We're going to try to do some of that today. Let's begin, I think, just looking at what Jesus said about himself. Because you notice on that page, there's two direct statements. First, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And then later, he says, you are the light of the world. So if I want to know what it means to be light of the world, the best place to go is to look at what Jesus taught about that. So turn with me to the book of John, chapter 1 first. Let's begin there. So if you pull out your Bible, turn to John 1. And let's just read how this whole book begins. This whole gospel begins. Just an interesting thing to do. Next time you're studying John, go through chapter 1 and just write down all the ways Jesus refers to himself or someone else refers to Jesus. There's lots of different ways. There's lots of different images for Jesus in this chapter. We're going to look at one, the light. But there's lots of other things in here, and it's interesting. You can just write those down, really, in the whole book of John, and see what come, but primarily at the beginning, what kind of things come to mind. So look at John chapter 1 and begin at verse 1. And I'm reading out of the New King James Version. So who in here has New King James? Who has the ESV? Okay, that's the majority. Okay. New King James it is, because that's what they have. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. So at the very beginning, there's several things said about Jesus, one of which is light, right? In him was light, and in him was life, and life was the light of men that shines in the darkness. Go down to verse 9. That was the true light, which gives light to every man coming into the world. All right, so I ask you to take a look at that, to read those passages together, and take a look at John chapter 8, verse 12, which is on the screen. There's a couple other times in John where Jesus refers to himself as the light. And ask, okay, what does that mean? And if someone new to the Bible asks you to explain this idea about Jesus, how would you explain that? I am the light of the world. The light came in the darkness. The light shined in the darkness. How would you explain Jesus was the light of the world? Take 30 seconds and just tell somebody next to you. All right, just talk about that for 30 seconds. In your words, explain Jesus is the light of the world. Okay, that was 30 seconds-ish. So someone tell me, what do you or someone around you, how did you put this? Jesus is the light of the world. What does that mean? Someone do the Bible, they read this like, what? What is that about? Yes?
He guides us like a lighthouse.
He guides us like a lighthouse. Okay, good. So he provides guidance. What else? Janae.
He allows us to be able to see, kind of like with that lighthouse imagery, but also he allows life to be there, kind of like the sun.
Okay, great. So he provides life. Yeah, I'm a biologist, right? The energy that's powering you right now used to be sunlight. Sunlight came, almost everything that's alive is actually powered ultimately by the sun. Sunlight comes down, plants convert sun energy, light energy, into chemical energy. And you either eat the plants or you ate an animal that ate the plant. Right? But anyway, it started as sunlight. So it's making your brain cells work right now, and your heartbeat and all that stuff used to be sunlight. So yeah, light has energy in it. And so it brings life to things. It exposes things, so it provides direction. We can actually see where we're trying to go. Yeah?
Well, light is also like a symbol of purity. So if he is the light, he is pure. And then we are also made in his image, or like he is the maker of us.
Good.
And we are supposed to be pure, but the darkness is sin. So that we bring darkness into ourselves. And that's the absence of light.
Okay, great. A lot in that. Yeah, there's a lot to that. Light also represents things that are pure, and it does in the Bible. A lot. But this whole light-dark thing is really common in the Bible. You guys with me? You guys in the middle with me? Hang with me. Yeah, it represents things that are pure. And so Jesus brought that to a world that really needed it because it had become very impure. And good, yes?
When there's light and darkness, the light cuts the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have light. You can't have darkness in light.
Correct.
Yeah, you can't have sin.
Okay, good. So where light comes in, darkness cannot be where light is. That's right. In fact, darkness, and you put it this way over here, just a second, darkness is really just the absence of light, right? It's the absence of good. It's the absence of purity creates darkness. Darkness isn't its own thing, right? You're missing something if you're in the dark, right? Light is that thing. Yes?
The world is full of lies, and he's the one and only truth.
Okay.
And we're stumbling around in the lies of the darkness of the world, but when we find him, we find that we can see what's our obstacles in front of us.
Okay, great. Sin entered the world through lies, right? That's Genesis 3 is all about that. Satan came and he introduced, using lies, he introduced darkness to the world. So that's great. In fact, look down in John chapter 1, verse 17. And what does it say Jesus brought? Somebody there just sort of shout out. What does it say Jesus brought to the world? John 1, verse 17. Grace and truth. Grace and truth. That's what Jesus came to bring. So back to your comment. All right. So with that idea of what Jesus did, I want you to think, again, I'm going to give you just a few seconds to sort of jot some things down. I don't want to talk over your mind while you're trying to think. And think of 3 specific examples where Jesus was the light in some kind of moment, some kind of incident. And Jesus was the light in that moment. And be specific, not Jesus spoke truth. Okay, he did, but tell me a time when he did that, or a time he did something. It doesn't have to be speaking truth. A time he did something to be the light of the world in a specific circumstance. Get the question? It's there on that page, by the way. All right, take a few seconds, jot down some specific illustrations of when Jesus was the light of the world. You're welcome to share ideas back and forth if you want. This doesn't have to be silent. You can talk to each other. That's a helpful thing sometimes. All right. Give me an example or two. Somebody. Give me an example when Jesus was the light of the world. In a specific case. Yes, sir.
I think it was being alive, and I compared it, put it together with being holy. So when Jesus was in the process of being persecuted and died and all that, physically abused, then he was being alive by just accepting it because he knew his father. He knew the plan of his father as well. And it's not that they put him to the cross. He was the one who put himself to the cross because he knew his father well. But
Okay.
the way that he handled that situation with one versus Pilate and all of them, just I compare that with this world and how we can look at Jesus. He was alive at that time.
Okay, good. Good. Well, he endured the cross. Yes, sir.
I think life can also be viewed as like goodness. And so Jesus showed life to others who didn't even see good in their lives, like the woman at the well, and like the lepers and the tax collectors, people who other people would never be around. He surrounded himself with them.
Okay, I got you. Good. So the castaways, the uninviteds of society, Jesus always reached out to those people. Okay, and that way was a light. Good. Good. Someone else? Yeah, good.
To continue on with the woman at the well, when her life was in the dark, he brought light, he brought basically the gospel to her.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Good. So, woman at the well, I'm glad you follow up on that. I wanted to do that too. What did he give the woman at the well? How did he, okay, he gave her the light. Don't tell me that though. That's sort of like saying, God in every Bible class question. Hard to go wrong. Right? So, but what did he do that gave her light? How was Jesus the light to the woman at the well? You're right. He gave her truth. I think that's what you told. What did he give to her?
He called her out on her sin of being married to men and living with him because it wasn't her original husband.
Excellent. One thing is he just spoke reality to her. You've had this many husbands. The one you're with now isn't your husband. That's truth. Hurtful truth, but it's not really hurtful, right? In the long run, it's helpful, right? Painful truth. Maybe that's the way. Painful, but it was a blessing to her. But he didn't stop there, right? He didn't just wag his finger and say, no. What did he do? What did he offer to give her? Water. What kind of water? Living water. Did she get that? Did she understand that? No. No. Not initially. She was confused. But Jesus gave her that. right? He said, look, this is your reality. You can have something better than that, and I'm going to give it to you. Right? Great, great. And no one else was willing to thought, the apostles were shocked that he was doing any of that thing. Great. Another example, when Jesus was the light of the world. That's a great example. Yes, sir.
When he physically died, there was a great darkness.
Okay, yeah, good. When he died, there was a great darkness over the earth, which in itself actually revealed something, right? It was a darkness, but it was actually revealing about who he was. Interesting kind of irony there, right? What else? Yes.
When he healed the blind man and physically gave him vision, so he brought him out of his own personal darkness and gave him the ability to see the light.
Great. So in John 9, he heals the blind man, spits the ground, rubs the mud, all that stuff, so he actually gave him physical sight. At the end of that story, there's nothing you can do in John. Go through John 9 and just look at how the blind man talks about Jesus, and you'll see his faith grow in that whole chapter. He's a good man. I think he's a prophet. By the time he's done, he knows who Jesus is. Right? As you see so Jesus gave that man his physical sight, but what he really gave him was something much bigger than that. Right? Great, great. Anything else? Time Jesus let light shine in the world. How about this row? Anybody here? Just call him. Yes. Great. Who is 12 or older? Raise your hand. 12 or older. Maybe everybody. That's probably everybody. Okay. So Jesus was your age or younger. And he was so interested that he was surprising the religious leaders there when his parents left, thought he was with them, and they were off on the run. Surprised them with his questions and his curiosity, his understanding, and his thoughtfulness, his serious-mindedness. That's right. Because he was after truth. As a kid, he was after truth. And he had questions, and he was bringing those up to him. Good, so we see how Jesus was the light of the world, right? In lots of ways. And if we took the time, we could delve into any one of those and really pull out what's happening there. That's one reason I like John's. John doesn't give us many accounts of Jesus' life, but the ones he gives are long. You get a lot of information. So it's interesting to just go read that whole conversation and how he's doing that with them. So, Jesus is the light of the world. Then he tells us, of course, in Matthew 5, you, Christians, you are the light of the world. So it's another way we reflect him. So let's talk about me and you. If he is the light, and he tells me that I am the light, how serious is it, this light business? How serious is that? Yes, that's a good illustration. Maybe you know what I'm after here. If Jesus says, you want to know who I am? I am the light of the world. Who are you? Oh, you are the light of the world. What does that tell you about being light of the world? Is that too vague? Too simple? We do need to follow his example. Why? We do have a purpose. That's right. And how important is his purpose? Huge. Important. Hugely important. If I fail to be the light to the world, more on that at the end. Okay, if I fail in this, it's significant. We're going to get to that here near just the last couple of minutes, I think. So being the light of the world is a significant responsibility. And that's something that at least I could sort of miss because I learned it so early as a kid. This little Christian light of mine, I've known since I was 3, and this group. But wait a minute, when I stop and think about that, I'm not a little kid anymore. What does it mean to be the light of the world? That is a serious responsibility. And it takes a mindset that's serious and mature and sober and beyond silliness, beyond things that are flippant or distracting. Matt?
I feel like it's always been emphasized about us being the difference between being in the world versus not being in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and that you need to be a light, but you need to not be in the world with things. You need to be a light around the world with things, and without participating in them.
And that's the great challenge, isn't it? Great challenge. Paul tells us, look, you must be in the world, but not of the world. You can't separate yourself from the world. You got to be right. We live right in the middle of it, but we can't be like it. And that's the trick, right? That's where it's hard. To live in the world, and we all do, but not look like the world. That is tough. Why is that so tough? Glad you brought that up. Why is that so hard to be a light in the world? Why is it not easy? You all know this. You live it, right? Yes.
Because people don't like the light.
That's right. How does the scripture put it? The darkness, what to the light? What's the verb? The darkness hates. Darkness hates the light. It's not irritated by it. It's not sort of bothered by it. Darkness hates the light. That's right. And so it's hard to be light. It's really hard sometimes. Good. The world does not like it. And we see that in Jesus' life too, of course. So knowing what this meant for Jesus makes it easier to understand what this means to us. So what exactly does Jesus mean when he says, you are the light of the world? Let's look at these few passages together. Take a look at Ephesians chapter 5, and then we'll look at Philippians chapter 2, and maybe 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Go to Ephesians chapter 5 first. This image of light is all over the place. You know, we could look at tons of passages, but we're just going to look at a handful. All right, Ephesians chapter 5. Is this your theme at West End? What's your theme this year? It's walk as children of light? Right, that's your theme this year, right? Okay, thank you. That's what I thought. So here's this verse, right? Ephesians 5 and verse 8. In fact, let's back up and let's just do let's start in verse 7. Therefore, do not be partakers with them, for you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. So there's several key things to point out there in this passage. You were once darkness, now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. All right, so you are light in the Lord. What does that tell you about your light? You are light in the Lord. That phrase is important. What does that tell you?
He's the source of our light.
Good. It's not my light. It's not my light that I'm shining. It's his light that I'm shining. So when he tells me you're the light of the world, that's what he's saying. He's already said it enough times. Right? You're the light of the world. He's saying you are my light. You're not your own. So if I'm the light of the world, it's because I'm so good and so cool that people need to see me. Is that the point? No, right? Who is so good? Jesus, and only Jesus, right? They need to see him through me. That's what they need to see. That's what it means to be the light of the world. Second key point here, in verse 10, to be a light of the world, what do we need to do? First question is really simple. What do we need to do? Just tell me what verse 10 says. Do what? Learn what's pleasing to God. Is that how the ESV puts it? Discern what's pleasing to the Lord? Okay. New King James says finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. So what does that mean? What does that suggest? You be a light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. Find out what is acceptable to the Lord. Discerning what's acceptable to the Lord. What's that suggest? Yes, sir. We got to study the Bible. And when I study the Bible, what does it tell me? That it tells us pleasing the Lord. That's right. I can learn that. That's what Paul's saying. I can learn that. The Bible is not so vague and so generic that I can't figure it out. Right? I don't have to have a PhD in Bible to understand the will of the Lord. I can understand it. And guys, that's a really key point. That's a really key point. Because whether you know it or not, a lot of you do, some of you may not, you're being told over and over again, you can't really know much of anything. What's good, what's evil, what's right, what's wrong. It all depends on what you think, how you were raised. That's not true. You find out what the will of the Lord is. You can do that, and that's implied by that verse. So if I'm going to be a light of the world, I need to figure out what that means. And it's his light, not my own. Excellent. All right, any thought, additional thought here in Ephesians chapter 5. You all are smart people. You're thinking people. You might be a little sleep deprived today, but you can still the horses are still running, maybe. Maybe you're down to hamsters, but there's something running on there. Yeah? Down to small mammals? Okay. Do the best. Hang in there. Any other thought on Ephesians? Question? Connection? Yes?
I think verse 15 through 17 kind of goes well with this too.
Okay, let me read this out of the mic. I'd let you if you had a mic, but I'll just do it real quick. 15 through 17, you said?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to read it and then make your comment on it loudly so we can hear it. Cool? All right. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. All right, what's your...
To be a light, we have to understand what God wants us to do, and we have to not waste our time. We have to learn what we're supposed to be doing and help spread the word and be a light.
That's good. Excellent. Light is not passive. Right. If I'm passive about this, I can't be the light. I can't do that. This requires active intentionality. I have to be intentional and purposeful about this. That's exactly right. And notice again, he said, understand what the will of the Lord is. That's twice in 8 verses. He says in verse 10 and verse 17, figure out what the will of the Lord is. Understand what the will of the Lord is. Twice he says that in this section. Great. Well, let's go to Philippians chapter 2, then, in verse 15. Philippians chapter 2. I'm actually going to back up and get a running start because there's a phrase I want to catch earlier that's important to this. So back up to verse 12 of Philippians chapter 2, and we'll read down through verse 15. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you, both to will and to do, for his good pleasure. Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast the word of life. It continues. All right. So what do you pick up there from Philippians chapter 2, particularly verse 15? We'll start in verse 15. What's the point there? Philippians chapter 2 and verse 15. And nothing earth-shatteringly crazy here in chapter 15. It's pretty straightforward, I think. You are? Again? Your lights in the middle of a crooked and perverse generation. Ugh, not a good place to be. But hey, that's where we are, guys. That's where we are. You're in the middle of that. You've got to be different than that. And that's not like a, you've got to be different than that. It's a, we need to be different than that. In a very positive, joyful way. We ought to be different than that. And it reinforces this point. Look back at verse 13. Make this point that we pounded in really hard yesterday. We've done it a little bit again today. Yeah. Look at verse 13. And what, someone who hasn't spoken up yet, what's the point of verse 13? With us being lights in the world. Philippians 2:13. What's the point? Yes, sir. I'm sorry? Good. That's right. And so what does that mean? It's not me. That's right. It's not me. Right? It's not all about me. God works through me to get his will done. So who gets the credit if I'm a really good light in the world? God gets that credit, not me. Right? I submit to him, great, but it's his work. In fact, who is it who builds inside me the will to do that? In verse 13. God does that. God teaches me to want to do that, and then God teaches me how to do that, and then God enables me to do that. He empowers me to do that. So all the credit for being the light of the world goes to God. It goes to Jesus. So sort of what we talked about yesterday. Remember that yesterday? You know, the master deserves credit for the masterpiece, not the masterpiece. So when I demonstrate the light of the world, it's Jesus' light I'm demonstrating, and the fact that I want to do that, I'm trying to do that, and I can do that, I owe it all to God for enabling that. That's a pretty powerful position to be in. Make sense? That's a pretty cool truth, pretty important truth for us to understand there. You are the light of the world. I am not the light because I'm so good, but because he is so good. And because he shines his light through me. So that's a key point. I'm not the light of the world because I'm such a good guy. It's because he is such a good being. And he shines his light through me. It is an honorable role you have, and I have. But he gets all the honor, not us. Right. Excellent. So, my identity. I am the light. I am the light of the Lord. And so there at the bottom of the page, the last few minutes here, we have about 7, 8 minutes. By that clock, 8 minutes, on my clock, about 10 minutes. So let's talk a little bit here at the end. We talked a little bit about why it's hard to be a light. Simple is, a simple answer is, well, the darkness hates the light. That's correct. So let's put a little meat on that. Got a comment? Or you just stretch it? Okay. thought I got a comment. Why else is it hard to be a light? Partly because the other people just oppose it, can make it difficult on us. Yeah.
Human desires.
Okay, explain that. Human desires.
Like desires in the heart and desires in the mind are two separate things.
Okay.
And I might have in my mind desires for God's word, but in my heart I have desires of the flesh.
Okay. Yeah, there's conflict. Absolutely. Romans 7 talks a lot about this. Paul has this image of how, and depending on what he's doing in that chapter, but whatever he's doing in that chapter exactly, I know I can relate to the idea that, look, what I really want to do, I'm not doing it. And the thing, part of me really doesn't want to do, that's what I'm doing. And you have this conflict, right, between things. Good. So God's not the only one trying to work through us. Satan's trying to work through us as well. He's trying to act on us and motivate us. And we're in the middle of this conflict. God's given us his word to influence us, and Satan is constantly giving us messages to influence us. Over here, somebody had the hand. Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes also it can be kind of discouraging, especially if you're in an environment where most of the lights or you're surrounded by darkness. It can be, or it also sometimes feels like no one even can tell, or is not doing anything because there's so
Yep.
much darkness. But I had this one interaction with one of my coworkers that I was like, whoa, I didn't know it was working like that. But he was talking about how he drinks and does stuff, and he's like, and that way, you realize that you can really enjoy life and you can't think about everything that's going on. And then I was like, I enjoy life and I don't do any of that. And then he was like, that's because you have an anchor. And I was like, because I've talked about him. I haven't had any studies with them, but they all know I'm Christians and stuff. And I was
Right.
like, whoa, that was really cool that he's able to realize Jesus is why I can be full of joy. I can do my job and I'm not drinking or
Right.
doing other things to change my mind and stuff.
Good, good. So could y'all hear that okay over here? Ish? Okay, good. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so if we can be discouraging, because I think, am I really doing anything? Am I really making a difference doing all this? But I tell you, there's always somebody looking at you, and you may very well not know it. There's always somebody looking at you. I used to teach with a lady who's now retired, but she and her husband, neither one were Christians. And went all the way through college, and somehow or another, she was around some Christians. I don't remember where, exactly what the story was. And they were both very worldly people. And they had a baby. And when you become a parent, a lot of times that makes you rethink what you're doing. And she and her husband started talking look, we've got to tone down the wildness of our life because we're just pretty wild. And he said, well, I don't know where to go. And she said, well, I don't know the answer, but I know who to talk to. And she called somebody who years earlier had been an influence on her. And she said, I know that person. And that's what we need. And it was a Christian. And she and her husband became Christians, and their kids are Christians, and all that. And it was a little known, it took years to develop, but that light was there. How do you go to a school environment where you are the only Christian maybe the only Christian that you know of in your class? Anybody in that kind of environment, all right? How many go to a school environment where you are one of very, very few Christians in your class? All right. How do you go to school? Well, that explains a lot, frankly. I don't know. So when you're, it may well be that there's a whole group of people, in fact, it's not may well, it is the case, that there's a whole group of people for whom you are the only light possible. You are the only person at that office who's a Christian. And if they're ever going to see a light, it's going to be you or it's going to be nobody. And that's very possible for a lot of you. And it will be the farther you get in life as well. Yes, sir.
Kind of to go along with that, it's sometimes difficult to be a light because when we're surrounded by others who are not light as well, we have the temptation and the need to feel like we need to fit in.
Yep.
So, like you said, it's either we're the light or nobody. And then also the fact that we have free will. If we choose to do whatever we want, and I think that's a lot of times why people don't want to follow Christ, because they don't want to walk that narrow way. They want to walk that wide way. That's the Bible describes it.
Yep. That's right. That's right. And that's hard. And that gets a little bit into something we'll study later today. Our need to be chosen. We all need to belong somewhere. And when you're a light in a world that hates you, it's hard to feel like you belong. And that in itself is a really strong pressure not to be different. Because suddenly you're on the outside. And that's hard to do. But it's our call to do. Hard doesn't mean you can't do it. Right? That's another reason it's hard to be a light, because light takes work. And it's always easier not to work. It's a Saturday morning, right? It's a lot easier not to work today than to have to get up and do something. The fact is that a failure to be, yeah, that's what I thought. Go back. A failure to be the light of the world is a failure to give to other people what God created me to give to them. It withholds from people what is my responsibility to give to them. And it leaves them without what I'm supposed to give. And that's a tremendous failure, right, on my part. Janae?
Something that I have just been thinking about while you've been talking about this is that idea of like a lighthouse, like thinking about us working in a lighthouse, and we might see danger that's like very far off, and thinking about like Watchmen in Isaiah, kind of gets that picture. We see the darkness of the world, and when we turn on that light, we warn all the people around us that there's darkness and that they need to be looking towards the light that's working through us. But if we're afraid to do that, and we don't do our job, then we still see the darkness and we're not helping really anyone, and we're kind of hiding our light. But when we do turn it on, then they will remember that they saw that light and they see God working through us. And like you said, that story, like it could be years later that this is actually like worked through in their life, but they will remember the goodness of God and the light that He shows through us.
It will. And most people at some point in life have something happen. They have kids, they get sick, their parents get sick, someone they love dies, and it rattles them, and a window that was closed before cracks open. And now they're ready to listen to something that before they weren't willing to listen to. And that's when the light has a chance to really make a difference. That influence now has a chance to get in there and help someone find Jesus. And if someone says, look, just to remind us all, that the idea of being a light in the world is not that I'm better than anybody. Am I better than anybody? No. The Bible makes it plain. I'm in the same boat as everybody else. And so are you. So being a light doesn't mean you're better, or I'm better. One more time, what does it mean if I'm the light? Who's better? Jesus is better. What I'm showing them is you need to know who Jesus is. Not me. You need to know who Jesus is. And to the degree that I reflect Him, it's because He's enabling me to do that. Let me tell you about who Jesus is. And I'm going to tell you that. Why do I like this way? Well, because I know who Jesus is. Let me tell you about Him, right? Not me. Because I'm not such a great thing. I'm not such a big deal. Any final comments? Question? Yes, sir.
Second Corinthians talks about not being unequally yoked with unbelievers.
Yes.
Which is relates to like the difficulty of being a light. It says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, what partnership has righteousness have lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness." Which like if we're too much known by darkness,
We do. That's exactly right. And again, that leads into what we'll study about being chosen. Because we've got to be in the world, but we can't be like it. So how do we stay in the world and still stay who we're supposed to be? In part, that means we've got to be connected to somebody else. And we're connected to something else. Then that gives us the ability to do that. Great connection. Great connection. All right, thank you all very much. Let's 15-minute break.